Today, we're going to dive into one of the most bizarre and honestly, one of the most brilliant legal defenses you'll ever come across. It's the story of a man who's on trial for his life, and instead of arguing legal points, he just tells a story, and he bets everything on it.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Your freedom, maybe even your life, is hanging by a thread. You get one shot to convince the most powerful people in the room. What do? Plead for mercy? Get bogged down in legal details? Well, the man at the center of our explainer today, he does something completely unexpected. He tells them his story.
So, let's set the scene. We're in the Roman city of Caesarea. The year is about 59 AD. The room is just buzzing with tension. You've got a prisoner, a man who's been in chains for years, and he's brought before a Roman governor and a king. Everybody's just waiting to hear what he's finally got to say for himself.
So who is this prisoner? Well, it's the Apostle Paul. And you got to understand, this moment isn't the start of his legal problems, not by a long shot. This is actually the climax of a long, frustrating, and frankly, ridiculous journey through the Roman justice system.
I mean, just look at this chain of events. For years, Paul's been getting bounced around. He's arrested in Jerusalem, he has to defend himself before the Jewish council, then he gets shipped off to Governor Felix, who just leaves him in prison for 2 whole years. Under the next governor, Festus, things get so sketchy that Paul has to appeal to Caesar just to avoid being killed in an ambush. And that's how he ends up here, in front of King Agrippa II, who, get this, is only hearing the case as a favor to help Festus write a report.
And this is where we get to the heart of the puzzle. The Romans can't seem to find anything he actually did wrong. The charges are super vague, sedition, disturbing the peace. So if he hasn't broken any Roman laws, why is he still in chains? What is this trial really all about?
And this is where Paul starts his defense. Except, it's not really a defense at all. It's more like a confession. He doesn't start by declaring how innocent he is. He starts by talking about who he used to be.
His opening move is genius. He looks right at King Agrippa, who knows all the Jewish customs, and he establishes his credentials. He says, "I lived as a Pharisee according to the strictest sect of our religion." He's basically saying, you know me. You know who I was. I was one of you. In fact, I was more passionate, more zealous than almost anyone. He makes it clear that he once believed it was his sacred duty to stamp out the very movement he now leads.
And just look at the contrast here. It is a complete 180. He went from being this fanatical persecutor, a man who literally voted to have people executed, to being a witness with this totally new mission, to open people's eyes, to turn them from darkness to light. So the question hanging in the air is, what on earth could cause a change that dramatic?
Well, Paul is about to tell them. This is the pivot point of his whole story. He doesn't just say he had a change of heart. No, he claims he had an encounter that was so real, so powerful, he simply could not deny it.
He tells them he was on the road to Damascus, on his way to hunt down more of these believers. And then, at high noon, a light from heaven, a light he says was brighter than the sun itself, just blazed around him and everyone with him. Can you imagine that? A light that completely overpowers the sun.
He says they all fell to the ground, and he heard a voice speaking to him in his native language. And the voice said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." In that one single moment, Paul's entire reality, his entire purpose, his whole belief system, it's not just shattered, it's completely rebuilt. The very person he was trying to destroy in the name of God was God.
But this encounter isn't just a, hey, you got it wrong moment. It's a commission. It's a new mission laid out for him in 4 crystal clear steps. He's now supposed to be a servant and a witness, and not just to his own people, the Jews, but to everybody. His new job is to turn people from darkness to light. So here's the absolute core of his argument. Paul's entire defense boils down to this one simple statement of fact. So then, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision. He's telling them, everything I've done since that day on the road, the very reason I'm standing here in these chains, is because I chose to obey that command. And now, he pivots. He's told his personal story, and he uses that to finally reveal the true reason he's on trial. It was never about Roman law. It was always about something much, much bigger. All those official charges, they were just a smokescreen. The real conflict, the one thing his accusers could absolutely not stand, was his message about the resurrection of the dead, and specifically, the resurrection of Jesus. That was the real dividing line. And then he turns it on them. He looks at King Agrippa and asks this incredibly powerful direct question.
Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead? He brilliantly takes the focus off of himself and puts it squarely on God's power and the hope that was at the center of their own faith. He's saying, this isn't my new crazy idea. This is our ancient hope.
And he drives the point home by arguing that his message isn't some newfangled heresy, it's the fulfillment of what their own prophets have been saying for centuries, that the Messiah had to suffer, that he'd be the first to rise from the dead, and that his light would be for everyone, Jews and Gentiles. He's basically saying, I'm not teaching something new, I'm announcing that our old story has reached its climax.
So how does this unbelievable testimony actually land in that Roman courtroom? Well, as you might expect, you get three very different reactions from the three main men who are listening.
First, of course, you have Paul, the prisoner, who doesn't back down 1 inch. Then you have Festus, the practical Roman governor. He just loses it. He literally shouts, "Paul, you are out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you insane." For him, the only way to process this story is to label it as madness. But then there's King Agrippa. He's clearly intrigued. He's unsettled. He says to Paul, "In a short time, you would persuade me to be a Christian." He's moved, but he's not willing to commit.
And then comes the official verdict. After the hearing, the governor and the king talk it over, and their legal conclusion is unanimous. And honestly, it's pretty shocking. They both agree this man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment. Legally speaking, he's innocent. Which brings us to the final, mind-bending paradox of this whole story. Wait a minute. If the highest authorities in the land just declared him innocent, why didn't they just unlock his chains and let him go?
And the answer is just a tragic, frustrating bit of legal red tape. It's an irony of Roman law. You see, for Rome, the process was everything. Once Paul had officially appealed to Caesar, that legal train had left the station. The local machinery had to see it through. Not even a king could stop it. Paul was found innocent, but he had to remain a prisoner.
But at the end of the day, you realize Paul's speech was never really about his own physical freedom. It was about a completely different kind of freedom. He was describing the ultimate transfer of authority that he had experienced firsthand, a movement from darkness to light, from being a slave to sin to finding total forgiveness. This was the transformation that defined his new life and his unstoppable message.
You see, Paul didn't present a legal argument. He presented his life as evidence. He laid out the story of his own transformation for them to judge. The court in Caesarea gave its legal verdict, but the story leaves the most important question of all hanging in the air. The evidence has been presented. Now, what is your verdict?